Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. I never believed in curses. Not until I watched my brother tear out a man's throat under a full moon and couldn't decide whether to run or help him finish the job. My name is Aaron Dells. I'm a 31-year-old paramedic from central Pennsylvania. I've seen some gruesome things in my line of work: roadside fatalities, overdose scenes, domestic stabbings, but nothing prepared me for what happened the week my brother came back. His name was Micah, 2 years older than me, always the wild one. Fast cars, fast fists, fast to disappear. He enlisted, served 2 tours in the Middle East, and then went dark. No letters, no calls, no online trace. We thought he was dead, until last November, when I came home from a double shift to find him standing on my porch barefoot, shirtless, and covered in dried blood. He didn't speak much, just asked for a shower, something to eat, and if I still had that shotgun Dad used to keep under the bed. I should have called the police. Instead, I let him in. Something was wrong with him, not just war. Wrong. His eyes were different, lighter, almost yellow. His skin ran hot. He kept twitching at noises I couldn't hear, and at night, he'd walk the halls, barefoot, growling softly under his breath, like a caged animal. On the 3rd day, I woke up to him vomiting in the sink. Not food, hair, clumps of it, long, coarse, grayish fur. I confronted him, asked if he'd been attacked, if he was using again, if maybe he'd lost his grip. He just looked at me and said, "I can feel the bones trying to remember." Then came the full moon. We were out in the woods behind the house, gathering deadwood. He froze mid-step and whispered, "It's coming." I thought he meant a seizure or an episode, but he dropped to his knees, hands digging into the soil. His mouth opened wide, and something like a growl came from inside him, deeper than vocal cords. Primal. I'll never forget the sound his spine made as it snapped backward. The transformation wasn't fast. It was violent. His skin tore at the seams, like wet paper. His legs bent the wrong way. Teeth spilled out of his mouth as new ones burst through the gums. His scream turned into a howl before I even realized I was running. I tripped, smashed my ribs against a root. When I turned to look, he wasn't Micah anymore. Not fully, taller. Hair covered every inch of him. His jaw hung open, drooling, steaming in the cold night air. And his eyes, God, his eyes, still his, still terrified. And then, he ran past me. Didn't attack. Didn't even look twice. He hunted something deeper in the woods. I don't know what, but when I made it back to the house, I locked every door and sat with the shotgun across my lap until sunrise. He came back at dawn, naked, shivering with blood on his lips and tears in his eyes. I tried to fight it, he whispered, but it's getting harder. It doesn't care who I am anymore. I didn't report him. I helped him clean up. I treated his wounds. I told myself I was protecting my brother. Then he killed someone. A hiker, young female, found 2 towns over, torn open like prey. No signs of assault, just pure animal violence. The news blamed bears. I blamed myself. Micah didn't deny it, just sat in the kitchen, staring at the wall, whispering her name. He'd heard her scream. That night, I locked him in the basement. Reinforced door chains. Prayers. It didn't work. When the moon rose, he changed anyway. Bent the steel chain, like wire. Tore the door clean off its hinges. I didn't see him leave. I only saw the wreckage. I spent the rest of that night in my car, shotgun on the dash, waiting for a monster that used to be my brother. When dawn came, I found him behind the shed, curled up like a dog, naked, shaking. "I'm not going to survive." "The next one," he said, "and I'm not supposed to." He handed me a note, his handwriting, just for words. "You know what to do." He didn't come home. The next full moon, I went searching, found the remains of a deer, then a second hiker, then Mika's boot, just one, half, buried in the mud. That was 6 months ago. They never found his body. But last week, a hunter was mauled 20 miles from my home. Witnesses claimed it wasn't a bear. It stood upright. It watched them before. It fled down. Now, every full moon, I load that shotgun and sit on the porch, because if he ever comes back, I owe it to my brother to do what he couldn't. Not because he was a monster, but because he was human. One night something happened that I cannot forget. Not because it was terrifying, but because it still feels unfinished. My name is Ellis Crane. I was 26 when I saw a man turn into a wolf right in front of me. And I don't mean in some mystical, majestic, Hollywood kind of way. I mean I saw a human man's body rip itself apart as something ancient forced its way out of his skin. But I should start from the beginning. I was raised in a small town in the Allegheny Mountains. Maple Hollow. You won't find it on any tourist list. It's one of those places people are either born into or warned to stay out of. My parents died when I was 12, car crash, so I lived with my grandfather, Walter, a Vietnam vet who smelled like tobacco and pine tar and didn't speak unless he had something important to say. He always told me one thing about the forest. If you hear howling close to town, light a fire, and if you hear nothing, run. I thought it was just the mutterings of a damaged man. PTSD, backwoods, superstition. It wasn't. In 2021, after I lost my job in Pittsburgh, I came back to Maple Hollow to reset. I stayed in my grandfather's old cabin, left to me after he passed the previous year. It was modest but comfortable, the kind of place where you can hear your own heartbeat at night. The first few weeks were peaceful, too peaceful. The forest didn't make a sound, not even crickets. That should have been the first warning. Then, one night in mid-November, something happened. I was splitting wood out back when I heard it. A low, dragging growl. Not loud, not threatening. More like breathing, but heavier. Wet. I turned around, and about 20 feet from me, I saw a figure leaning against a tree. A man, shirtless, trembling, barefoot in the snow. He looked lost, starved. His arms were longer than normal, and his back, it twitched like something was crawling just under the skin. I called out, "Hey man, you okay?" He didn't answer. Instead, he fell to his knees and screamed. I'll never forget the sound. The air snapped cold. Birds flew from nowhere, and then he began to change. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't cinematic. His jaw cracked open, tendons snapping like dry rubber bands. His eyes turned black. Not red, black. His spine bent backward, with a crack that made my stomach turn. And that's when the fur came, sprouting from his arms, legs, back, erupting through pores like wire, from a sponge. I ran back inside, locked the door, bolted the windows, grabbed the flare gun from the shelf, and lit the old fire pit out front, just like Grandpa always said. And then I waited. It circled the house. For hours. I saw it once through the living room window. A silhouette tall and lean, walking upright. Its head was wolfish but too narrow, teeth too long. It wasn't looking for food. It was looking for me. The next morning, there were claw marks across the front porch, deep, straight through the planks, blood too. Not mine. I stayed locked inside for 3 days. On the 4th day, I hiked into town and told Sheriff Mallory everything. He just stared at me, then said, "You saw Levi." "Who?" "Levi Hawkins. Went missing 6 years ago. He was infected. We figured he didn't make it past the first winter. But I guess he's still changing." "What the hell do you mean infected?" Mallory looked over his shoulder and leaned in close. "You think Hollywood made this up? These creatures, they don't want to be like this. Something gets inside them, tears their soul apart piece by piece. They fight it until they can't. Once that tipping point hits, they stop being human." I didn't go back to the cabin after that. I moved into town, took a job at the library, tried to live normal. But here's the thing. I've been hearing something lately at night, just outside my window. Not a growl, not a howl, breathing, slow, heavy, like it remembers me, like it's waiting for me to remember it too. And worst of all, I'm starting to wake up dizzy. My spine hurts, my jaw locks. Sometimes when I sleep, I dream I'm running through the woods on all fours, naked, laughing. When I was young, just 15, I saw a monster tear my neighbor in half. I wasn't supposed to be outside that night. My mom worked late shifts at the diner, and my dad had left 3 years earlier, so I had the house to myself. I was bored. The Wi-Fi was out, and our little corner of northern Michigan didn't exactly offer a vibrant nightlife. So, I did what I usually did when I felt restless. I climbed out onto the roof and watched the woods. The tree line starts maybe 50 yards from our backyard, but even as a kid, I felt like the trees watched us more than we ever watched them. There's something about thick pine forest in the middle of nowhere that makes your skin feel thin, like anything could slip through. It was about 11:30 when I saw the thing. I heard a scream first, not the horror movie kind, not a shout. This was short, ripped from someone's throat like they were surprised by it themselves. I turned my head, and across the backyard fence, in the neighbor's yard, I saw movement. My neighbor, Ken Booth, was stumbling backwards toward his garage. He was holding a rake like it was a sword. Then I saw it. At first I thought it was a bear. Huge, black, furred, running on all fours. But then it stood up, tall, human, shaped, but wrong. Its arms reached to its knees. Its head was elongated, snout narrow, eyes yellow and focused. The muscles under its fur rippled as it moved, fast, like smoke caught in the shape of an animal. But what stuck with me wasn't how it looked. It was how it paused, before it attacked. Ken, it looked around. It sniffed the air, and I swear to you, it looked directly at me. Ken swung the rake. It snapped the handle like a toothpick. Then it grabbed him by the shoulders, lifted him off the ground, and bit down into his stomach. I heard the wet crunch of it. I threw up into my shirt. I stayed there, shaking on the roof, until dawn. When the cops came, they said it was a cougar attack, said Ken was drunk and wandered into the woods, but his blood was on the driveway. His teeth were found lodged in the lawn. I stopped sleeping after that. A week later, I found claw marks on my bedroom window, 3 of them deep. I begged my mom to move. She said no. She didn't believe me. Said I needed to stop reading internet stories and go back to church. So I started sleeping in the bathtub with a knife. Then the dream started, running, blood in my mouth, screaming, a full moon, cold wind against fur, always ending with a howl. I went to the library, looked up local lore. There were dozens of stories. Old miners in the 1800s, German settlers who spoke of Wolfmanor, a logging camp that went silent in 1934, all buried under time and doubt. But I knew the truth. There was something in those woods, something old, something hungry. I stopped going to school, started locking the doors during the day, but it didn't matter. On the next full moon, I heard it again. This time, on the roof. Heavy, deliberate steps. I held my breath in the tub, clutched the knife so hard my hand cramped. I could hear it breathing through the vent. My mom found me the next morning, told me I needed help, said I was hallucinating, took my knife away. She didn't hear it because she didn't believe in it. She didn't believe until she saw it for herself. The next full moon, it came to the front door, knocked, and when she opened it, she's gone now, missing, vanished. The cops think she ran away, but I know better, because 2 nights ago, I woke up in the forest naked, hands covered in blood. I looked down and saw claw marks in the dirt around me, not deep ones, just enough to spell one word: run. I was 19 when I learned the truth about my father. Not the kind of truth that shatters families or changes your name. No, this truth was primal, bone deep, the kind that makes your skin feel too tight for your body, the kind you inherit, not through bloodlines, but through something darker. It happened in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, near a place called Hollow Pines, a township so small it doesn't show up on Google Maps. We used to go there every summer to stay in my grandfather's cabin. After he died, my father kept it up himself, fixed the plumbing, chopped the wood, maintained the trail to the lake. That year, my mom was in the hospital, and my dad said he needed to get away for a few days. He asked if I wanted to come. I said yes because, despite our distance, I missed him. I didn't know it then, but that trip was never about peace. It was about containment. We arrived just after sundown. The cabin looked like it had been carved out of the woods by hand. Log walls, moss-covered roof, antlers nailed above the door. My dad didn't speak much as we unpacked, just lit a fire, made some beans, and sat silently as the forest crept. And around us, that night, something strange happened. I was in the loft when I heard it, whimpering. Not human, not animal, either. Something in between. I crept to the window and looked out at the trees. That's when I saw my father naked, on his knees, shaking violently under the moonlight. I thought he was sick, having a seizure, but then he screamed. No, not screamed, roared, like his chest was being torn open. I ran outside, shouting his name. He turned toward me. His eyes were glowing. His teeth had lengthened. Not fangs. Fangs are neat. These were jagged, splintered, like broken glass jammed into his gums. His body twisted, his bones audibly snapping. I watched him grow taller. Hair exploded from his back. His spine arched like a beast on all fours. Should have run. I tried to run, but I froze. He didn't attack. He stood still, breathing hard, chest heaving. And then, in a voice that wasn't entirely his own, he whispered, "Go inside, lock the door, don't come out till sunrise." I obeyed. The next morning, I found him naked by the fire pit, covered in blood and pine needles. His arm was broken, his mouth swollen, but his eyes were clear, like nothing had ever happened. He didn't explain, just said, "Now you know, we didn't go home, not for another 2 nights." He told me the truth in pieces, like it was physically painful for him to speak the words aloud. It started when I was 22, a night hike. Something bit me. Didn't see what? Woke up a week later, covered in blood, and half a mile from camp. The change happens under full moons, but sometimes, when I'm angry or scared, it starts early. I've killed animals. God help me, I think I killed a man once in 1998. I woke up with a wedding ring in my mouth. Don't tell your mother. There are more like me. Some try to fight it, some lean into it. But we all feel it. The hunger, the pull. He said it. Skips generations sometimes, but not always. He said he wasn't sure about me yet. I didn't sleep that night. It's been 3 years since that trip. My dad's gone now. Died in a hunting accident. Or that's what the police said. I know better. I saw the way the body was found. Shredded. Bones picked clean. No animal did that. No animal respects the face like that. Like it knew him now. Every month, I lock myself in my basement. Just in case. Sometimes I wake up outside. Sometimes I find my fingernails cracked, my clothes ripped. And sometimes, just before dawn, I see footprints leading away from the house, barefoot deep, inhumanly wide. Sometimes I follow them, not far, just enough to know where they're going. They always stop at the edge of the woods. They always face back toward the house. And I swear I can hear breathing in the trees, like someone waiting for me to finish becoming. One night something happened which I cannot forget. I was 27, working a dead-end job in pest control, stuck in a one-bedroom apartment in western Pennsylvania, the kind of town where nothing happens and every day bleeds into the next. I wasn't special, not brave, just drifting. But then my uncle died, and I inherited his cabin out near Allegheny National Forest. I had only met him twice, years ago. A wiry old man with a glassy eye and a stare that seemed to look right through you. My dad said he lived alone for a reason. Said he was a man better left in the woods. I took the inheritance out of desperation more than curiosity. I needed change. I needed isolation. I had no idea I was walking straight into something old and hungry. The cabin was beautiful, at first glance. Log, built, moss along the shingles, old cast-iron stove in the corner. There were books everywhere, some handwritten, some in languages I didn't recognize. And there were rules. A notebook on the kitchen table, leather, bound, with a page that read, "If you hear footsteps, hide. If you smell wet dog, light the candles. If the fog comes through the trees, don't look outside. No matter what you hear." I laughed. I thought it was some eccentric old man joke. Maybe he wrote fiction. Then the sun set, and the air changed. The wind died completely. Not slowed, stopped. I realized how unnatural silence feels when the woods stops speaking. Then came the scent, like damp fur and rotting meat. It slid into the cabin through the cracks in the window frame. I got a chill, like my skin was trying to run without the rest of me. I lit the candles, all of them. Then I heard footsteps, not on the porch, not around the house, on the roof, heavy, slow, deliberate. I backed against the wall, clutching the useless kitchen knife I had grabbed. Then came the scratching, long, slow drags across the shingles. It wasn't a raccoon. It wasn't a bear. Something was studying me. Then it jumped down. I heard claws click against the deck. Something sniffed at the door, huffed against the windows. I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't work. My mouth was dry as sand. And then, I made the mistake of looking outside. I just glanced. Reflex. A shadow passed the window, and I turned my head before I could stop myself. Yellow eyes met mine, not glowing, not magical, just aware. This wasn't an animal. It stood upright, its jaw opened wide, tongue lolling out. Its arms were too long. Fingers, not paws, pressed to the glass. Then it smiled. I don't remember much after that. I woke up on the floor, hours later. Candles burned low. No sign of the thing. But its prints were there. Huge, deep claw marks in the dirt outside. And in the morning light, they looked almost human. I found more notes in the house. Descriptions of a creature. Local legends. An old name scratched out over and over. Hundmensch. A werewolf, but not the kind from movies. These things weren't infected. They weren't bitten into it. They chose it, worshipped it. And once you see one, really see one. They know you forever. That was 6 months ago, and I can still smell wet dog before it happens. I moved back to the city, got cameras, motion lights, salt across the windowsills, but every full moon, I hear it sniffing, scratching, laughing, and I know, sooner or later, it's coming back, because I looked, and now, it wants me to see more. I was 16 when it happened to me, old enough to think I was invincible, too young to recognize real danger when it stood 10 feet tall in the middle of the forest, cloaked in shadow and breathing like thunder. My family owned a small piece of land out in Montana, thick pines, no cell service, just a battered old hunting cabin with no electricity and an outhouse that made you pray for sunrise. We went every summer, like tradition. My dad said it built character. I think it broke me instead. That year, 2011, I had just gotten my learner's permit. I was obsessed with getting my license, leaving town, finding something beyond the same four walls of my high school. So I brought my journal and my old iPod, planning to write songs, maybe sketch a few trees. I didn't expect what was waiting for us. It started the first night. A scream, not a coyote. Not a bobcat. This was wrong. Too guttural, too long, and it seemed to come from everywhere. My mom brushed it off. Mountain lion, maybe, she said, but her eyes didn't match her voice. My dad just grabbed the rifle. The second night, I saw it. We had no power, so we used oil lamps and an old generator for the freezer. Around midnight, I went outside to pee, half asleep, cursing mosquitoes. That's when I saw the outline at the tree line. Tall, taller than my dad. It crouched low, watching me. Its eyes caught the moonlight. They didn't glow, but they reflected, like mirrors, and the way it moved, it didn't walk out of the woods. It unfolded. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. My whole body knew something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. I wasn't at the top of the food chain anymore. I backed into the cabin, silent, locked the door. My hands shook for 20 minutes. I didn't sleep. On the third day, we found the deer. It was 10 feet from the cabin, torn in half, not eaten, just destroyed. Like it was a message. No bite marks, no signs of a fight. Just shredded muscle, ribs, cracked open like a book, and beside the carcass, footprints. Not paw prints, feet, like a man's, but broader, clawed, deep, heavy. That's when my dad stopped pretending. He didn't say it out loud, but he stopped sending us outside alone, kept the rifle loaded and near the door, stayed up all night, sitting in the dark, listening, and every night, it got closer. We heard it breathing just outside the cabin walls, scraping claws on the wood, circling on the fourth night. We tried to leave. The truck wouldn't start. Dad popped the hood and just froze. Battery gone. Cleanly removed. Not stolen. Taken. That was the night it howled. Not just a sound. A presence. It made my skin ache, like the sound had claws. Then we heard it running. Not toward us. Around us. Circling so fast, the trees shook. Then silence. And then, the roof creaked. It was on top. We all stood in the center of the room, not speaking. Mom whispered a prayer. Dad aimed at the ceiling. I was shaking so hard I thought my knees would give out. Then the trapdoor to the attic lifted, just an inch. Enough for fingers to reach through. I've never heard my dad scream before that night. He fired through the ceiling. The thing dropped to the ground outside with a thud that shook the cabin. Then it screamed again, angrier, closer. Then silence. We didn't sleep. When morning came, we packed up, carrying only what we could. We walked 6 miles through the woods, to the ranger station. Didn't speak the whole way. The rangers didn't believe us. but they did send people back. They found the cabin destroyed, ripped apart, like it had exploded from the inside out. The walls were covered in claw marks, and, in one of them, deep and deliberate, was a symbol I still see in my nightmares. It wasn't random, it was a warning. We never went back. My dad never hunted again. My mom still wakes up screaming some nights. And me. I moved across the country. I don't camp. I don't hike. I don't even own boots. But sometimes, when the wind is still and the moon is full, I swear I can smell something like wet fur, dot, and blood, and I know it's still out there, waiting. One evening, I was dizzy. That's the clearest memory I have of the beginning. It had been a long drive, nearly 9 hours from my apartment in Cincinnati to the Appalachian stretch outside Boone, North Carolina. I was on my way to visit an old college friend, Garrett, who'd recently taken a job managing wildlife trails in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He'd been practically begging me to visit. Said I needed a break from city noise, from work stress, from people, and I believed him. He didn't tell me the real reason until much later, when I pulled up to the trail office. A weather-worn ranger cabin nestled in a cradle of trees. The sun was already setting. Garrett was waiting outside, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. That wasn't like him. He used to be the calmest guy I knew, a slow talker, patient. Now he barely met my eyes. "You didn't stop anywhere?" he asked. I told him no. He nodded, then added, "You didn't see anything on the way up?" That struck me as strange, but I laughed it off. "What? Like a bear?" He didn't laugh. Instead, he crushed the cigarette and said, "Let's get inside. Fog's coming." It did come, fast. Within minutes, it rolled down the mountainside like something alive, crawling through trees and past the porch. The temperature dropped fast enough to see our breath. That night, Garrett told me about the disappearances. 3 hikers in 2 months, he said. No trace, not even a sock. He leaned in, whispering now. "They say it walks upright, runs like a man, but faster. You smell it before you hear it, like copper, rust, dog hair. If you hear it growl, you've got seconds." I thought it was a joke, a test. One of those initiation scares. I wish it had been. Around 2 a.m., I woke up drenched in sweat. My head throbbed. The air was thick, metallic. Garrett was standing by the window, shotgun in hand. He held a finger to his lips. Then I heard it. Something exhaled just outside the wall. Deep, wet, and low. Not a snarl, not a grunt. Just breathing. The kind of breath that feels like it's inside you. Then footsteps. Slow, dragging, like it was limping, or pretending to limp. The worst part, it started mimicking. "Help. A voice whispered outside. Hurt, leg, please." Garrett's eyes filled with tears. "It learns voices," he mouthed. "It's not human." We didn't sleep. We didn't speak. Not until dawn. When the fog cleared, we found tracks in the dirt. Huge prints, with toe pads, like a wolf. But wrong, twisted, deformed. The stride length was massive. Whatever it wasn't just passing through. It was watching us. Over the next 2 days, things got worse. We lost power. Then the radio. Then the phone signal, which had always been weak, vanished completely. Garrett stopped talking altogether. He just sat at the table, fingers twitching, eyes on the door. At one point, he said, "You're not supposed to invite it in." I didn't know what he meant. I still don't. Not fully. On the 3rd night, the thing touched the window. I mean, that literally, its hand pressed against the glass. Long claws, fingers to human. Its head dipped low, and I swear, it smiled. Not out of joy, out of recognition. Then it spoke my name, not close, Not clear, but enough. It knew who I was. I lost control. I grabbed my coat and ran out the back door, into the woods, into the fog. Garrett screamed my name, but I didn't stop. I ran until I couldn't breathe, until the trees bent toward me like they were warning me, until I collapsed at the base of a rock face. And then, I heard it. Close. Real close. Not growling, panting, like it had chased me for sport. And now it was, enjoying my fear. I don't remember getting back. I must have blacked out. But I woke up, on the floor of the ranger cabin. Garrett holding a mirror to my face. "You stopped breathing," he said, his voice shaking. "It almost had you. We left at first light." Garrett quit his job that same week. Said he wouldn't go back. Said no one should. That was 3 years ago. I don't hike anymore. I don't travel rural roads. But sometimes, rarely, I still smell it. That same sick blend of rust, dog, and death. And I know it remembers me, because I looked at it, and it smiled. When I was 15, I followed the wrong sound into the woods behind my grandmother's house. I've told people it was a dog. That's the version I stick with. Oh, I thought I heard a dog whining. I'll say harmless, simple, but that's not what it was. It was me, my own voice, crying for help. We were visiting my grandmother in a small Pennsylvania town, one of those places that seemed carved out of a different decade. She lived in a weathered farmhouse nestled against a stretch of woods the locals called Moonvale. Nobody went hiking in Moonvale. No bike trails, no campsites, not even hunters. There were rumors, sure. My cousin Tony used to tell me ghost stories about a half-man, half-wolf that lived out there, howling at the moon and eating deer whole. I thought it was crap, until that night. It was late September. The air had that sharp bite of fall, and the moon was just shy of full, big, and bloated behind thin clouds. I remember standing in my grandmother's kitchen, washing a plate, when I heard it. Help. It was faint, coming from the tree line behind the barn. Help me. Same voice, same tone, but it wasn't a voice I recognized. I thought it was some kid, maybe lost from a neighboring property. I was 15. Stupid and eager to be brave, so I slipped on my jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and headed out the back door. The flashlight flickered almost immediately. Classic, I know. I followed the voice for maybe 10 minutes. It would call out, then stop, like it was waiting for me to move closer. I kept thinking I was getting near, but every time I arrived at the spot, the voice would jump again, farther away. That's when I heard something behind me, breathing deep. Slow dot. I spun around. Nothing, just trees and moonlight, but I felt it, like something was watching. Every hair on my body stood up, and the temperature dropped like I'd stepped into a freezer. Then it called again, but this time, it used my voice. "Jason." I froze. "Jason, help." I backed away, stumbling on roots and fallen leaves. Then, it growled. Not like a dog. Lower, vibrating. It came from my left and right, at the same time, like it was circling me. I turned and ran. I didn't care where I was going. I just ran. Branches ripped at my arms. I dropped the flashlight and kept going. I could hear it behind me now. Running. 4 legs. Heavy dot, then a snap, loud and sudden, and the forest went silent. I turned and saw it. Just for a second, it stood at the edge of the trees, half in shadow. Tall, easily 7 feet. Black fur, but patchy, like it had been burned. Its face wasn't a wolf's. It was more human. Its mouth was open, but it wasn't breathing hard. It didn't have to. I ran faster than I ever have. When I got back to the house, I slammed the door and locked it. My grandmother was waiting, pale and shaken. "You heard it, didn't you?" she said. I couldn't speak. She poured me tea with hands that trembled. Then she told me the truth, that every few years, someone hears a voice in the woods, their own voice, and sometimes they don't come back. She called it the moonwalker, not a ghost, not a man, something in between, something that mimics, something that hunts by luring. I asked if anyone ever killed it. She shook her head. You don't kill something that's older than the trees. That night, I slept with the lights on. The next morning, I went outside to look at the edge of the woods. There were tracks, huge, like wolf prints, but longer, wrong, and beside them, etched into the dirt with a claw, or maybe a stick, was a word. Jason. I've never been back to Moonvale. Sometimes, though, I'll be walking down a quiet street, or lying in bed with my eyes closed, and I'll hear it again. I'll whisper my own voice, calling from far away. Jason, help. And I know it hasn't forgotten. One night, something happened that I cannot forget, because part of it is still with me. My name is Lydia Mercer, and I was 29 when I rented a cabin near the Great Smoky Mountains to finish writing my book. I needed solitude, silence, and escape. I'd recently gone through a brutal breakup and was trying to outrun the feeling of being watched in my own apartment. Funny how I ran from something imaginary, only to find something real. The cabin was old but solid. No internet, limited cell service, and surrounded by dense woods. The woman who handed me the keys at the rental office told me not to go hiking alone at night. I'm serious, she said, smiling too stiffly. Don't go out after dark, especially not near the river. I laughed. She didn't. The first 2 nights were uneventful. I wrote during the day and watched the stars through the skylight at night. It was peaceful, so quiet it hurt. On the 3rd night, the scratching started. It was faint, like nails dragging across wood. At first I thought it was a raccoon, or maybe a branch in the wind. But the next morning I found long, thin grooves on the front door, parallel scratches, as if something had run a hand across it. Not claws, fingers. I tried to brush it off. That night, I locked every window and kept my phone on me, even though I had no signal. I left a flashlight on the kitchen table and carried a fire poker from the fireplace wherever I went. By 2 a.m., the scratching returned, but this time, on the window beside my bed. I didn't move. I held my breath. I could feel something outside, heavy, breathing. Then came the tapping. 1, 2, 3. Soft knuckles, not animal. I gathered my courage and peeked through the edge of the curtain. I still wish I hadn't. There, just outside the glass, was a face, half hidden by shadow. The snout was long, the eyes a cloudy yellow, but the mouth, that smile, it looked too human to belong to anything wild. Its ears twitched as it leaned forward and licked the glass. I dropped to the floor and crawled into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I spent the rest of the night in the tub, poker clutched in white knuckles, waiting for dawn. But the worst part came when the sun rose, because the window was clean. No scratches, no prints, no sign of moisture, only a smear of blood on the inside of the bathroom door. I packed my things and left, but I didn't get far. Less than a mile from the cabin, I hit something in the road. It was lying motionless, fur, matted with dirt and blood. Looked like a large wolf, but too large. I stepped out cautiously, and as I approached, it opened its eyes. Human eyes, amber, colored, deep, full of knowing. I couldn't move. Then it spoke, not with its mouth, but with something deeper. Inside me, like my own thoughts were being hijacked. You saw me. I stumbled backward. It stood, unsteady, snarling, and leaped into the trees. I drove for hours, shaking, crying, unable to process what had happened. That was 5 months ago. Since then, something's been happening to me. I don't sleep during the full moon. I wake up with soil beneath my fingernails. Once, I found a rabbit carcass in the tub and I don't know how it got there. The worst part, sometimes I hear myself growl, not in anger, in hunger. I'm scared of what I'll become. But I'm more scared of what I've already become, because I didn't just see the werewolf that night. I think it chose me. When I was 17, I learned why no one walked the train tracks after dark in my hometown. I grew up in a dead-end Pennsylvania coal town, the kind where history hangs heavy in the air like soot. The mines had been closed for decades, but the land still bore the scars. Abandoned houses, rusted equipment, and that old stretch of railway. The one that cut through the valley like a scar. Kids said it was haunted, that people disappeared out there, but I didn't believe in ghosts. Not then. It started on a cold Friday night in November. My best friend, Tyler, dared me to walk the tracks with him from the trestle bridge to the old coal depot, a mile and a half stretch through deep woods. We'd done dumber things before, so I said yes. We took flashlights and a Bluetooth speaker, playing classic rock to keep the mood light. It worked for a while. The tracks were rusted, and leaves crunched underfoot, owls called overhead, and the occasional gust of wind reminded us how alone we were. Halfway through, the speaker cut out. We stopped, hit it, checked Bluetooth. Nothing. Then we heard it low, guttural, a growl. We both turned, flashlight scanning the trees. Coyote, Tyler whispered. I shook my head. The sound was too deep, too wet, like something growling through blood. Then we heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, behind us on the gravel. We spun around. Nothing. Then a snap from the woods ahead. I caught a glimpse. Just a flash, but I'll never forget it. Tall, hunchbacked, with shoulders that jutted too high, and a head that was all snout and teeth. Eyes that reflected our flashlights like molten silver. Tyler ran. I ran too, but I tripped on the rail and fell hard, face first into gravel. That's when I felt it. Hot breath, just behind me, and the sound, sniffing. I rolled over, swinging the flashlight like a weapon. It was there, a werewolf. Real, not myth. Fur black as tar, with patches missing, revealing scarred, leathery flesh. Hands, not paws, clawed, but vaguely human. Its mouth hung open, drool dangling from long yellow fangs. But its eyes were intelligent, curious. It didn't pounce. It tilted its head, studied me. Then it backed away and disappeared into the trees. I ran like hell. Tyler was waiting by the old depot, wide-eyed and bleeding from a scrape on his cheek. We didn't say much on the walk home. The next day, Tyler swore he dreamed it. Said I must have hit my head and imagined the whole thing. I tried to believe him. I really did. But that night, I woke to something tapping at my window. Not claws, a finger. When I pulled back the curtain, nothing was there. Just a single, dirty, paw print on the glass, and beside it, in the condensation, was a smudge of writing. Next full moon. I moved out of town a year later. Haven't been back since. But every month, when the moon is high and full, I get the same dream. Dark tracks, cold wind, and that low wet growl just behind me. I was 22 when I first saw him, the man who wasn't quite human. I'd just moved to a tiny logging town in northern Minnesota, the kind of place where people keep to themselves and the winters last forever. I took a job at the local diner, which was more of a gathering spot for miners, hunters, and anyone trying to survive the cold. One evening, after my shift, I was walking home along a narrow dirt road that cut through the forest. The moon was full, bright enough to cast long shadows, but the air was still and heavy, like something was watching me. I heard a twig snap to my left and froze. From the edge of the trees, a figure stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, covered in matted brown hair from head to toe, but not a bear or any animal I'd ever seen. His eyes, amber and reflective, locked onto mine. He didn't speak, didn't move fast, just stood there, breathing heavily, watching. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted. Suddenly, the figure bent over, hands elongating into claws, mouth stretching into a snarl full of sharp teeth. But then, just as quickly, he straightened, transforming back into something almost human, though his face was twisted, part man, part beast. I gasped and stumbled backward, slipping on the frozen ground. The creature growled low, not like an animal, but a warning, and then he was gone, vanishing into the dark forest. That night, I didn't sleep. I felt like something had marked me. Days passed, and strange things happened. Scratch marks on my door, shadows flickering in my peripheral vision, and a cold, unnatural howl that woke me every night. One full moon later, I woke up with scratches on my arms, deep, jagged lines, and an overwhelming hunger I couldn't explain. I've never been the same since. Sometimes, I catch glimpses of fur where my skin should be. Sometimes, I hear the growl coming from inside me. I don't know if I'm becoming him or if he's becoming me. One night, something happened that I cannot forget. I was 24, working as a park ranger in the dense forests of Vermont. The job was lonely, but I loved the isolation. The trees, the silence, they were my escape from the noise of the world. On a cold autumn evening, I was doing a routine patrol near an old logging trail when I noticed something strange. Deep, enormous footprints in the muddy ground. Too large to be a bear or any wildlife common to the area. Curious, I followed them into the thick brush. The deeper I went, the heavier the air felt, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the trees. I froze. From the shadows emerged a figure, towering, covered in dark fur, with eyes glowing a fierce yellow. But what chilled me the most wasn't its size, or its snarling mouth. It was the way it stood on two legs, with hands more like claws than paws, and how it watched me, intelligent, calculating. I reached for my radio, but the voice wouldn't come out. The creature took a step forward, then stopped, sniffed the air, and let out a sound that was half growl, half warning. Then, it turned and disappeared into the night. I ran back to camp, heart pounding. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing footsteps around my cabin and catching glimpses of glowing eyes outside my window. Days later, locals told me stories of a wolf man seen near the logging trails, how it stalked the woods at night, hunting, not for food, but for something else. I realized then that I wasn't just a ranger. I was prey. And whatever was out there was waiting for me. When I was 19, the full moon changed everything. I grew up in a small town in the Appalachian Mountains, the kind of place where everyone knows your name. And the stories you hear around the fire aren't just tales, they're warnings. It was early October, and the leaves were turning gold and crimson. I'd just started college, but was home for fall break. One night, A group of friends and I decided to explore the old Hollow Creek woods, a dense forest rumored to be cursed. We knew the stories, how people had vanished there over the years, how strange howls echoed at night, how no one dared enter once the moon was full. But we were young, reckless. We hiked deep into the woods just as the moon began to rise, its light filtering through the branches like silver knives. As night fell, the forest grew unnaturally silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just a heavy, suffocating stillness. Then, from the darkness, came a low growl. We froze. Out of the shadows stepped a creature, half man, half wolf. Towering muscles rippling under matted fur, eyes blazing like embers. It moved with terrifying grace, stalking us like prey. We ran, branches whipping our faces, heartbeats pounding, but the creature was fast. Too fast. It cornered me near an old, collapsed cabin. I remember the scent, feral, musky, like earth and blood. Then came the pain, claws digging into my skin, teeth tearing at my arm, but I didn't pass out. Instead, I saw its eyes, haunted, human, and in that moment, I understood. This wasn't a monster born from myth. It was a man cursed, trapped between worlds. I escaped that night, but something inside me changed. The full moon began to pull at my soul, twisting my thoughts, awakening a hunger I couldn't control. I started to see shadows moving in my peripheral vision, hear whispers calling my name. I knew the curse had passed to me, and now, every month, when the moon shines full and bright, I fight to keep the beast inside from breaking free, because if I lose, there's no telling what horrors I'll unleash. One evening, I was dizzy when the howl broke the night. I was 26, working as a wildlife biologist in a remote part of Montana. My job was to track wolf packs and study their behaviors. I knew the forests well, every trail, every creek, but nothing prepared me for what I encountered that night. The full moon hung low and swollen, casting pale light over the dense pines. I was camped alone by a riverbank, miles from civilization, reviewing notes by the campfire. Suddenly, a howl shattered the silence, deep, guttural, unlike any wolf I'd heard. My skin prickled. From the darkness, something moved. I caught sight of a massive figure, standing upright, larger than any bear or wolf. Its eyes glowed a fierce amber, and thick fur rippled across its muscular frame. It watched me with intelligence and fury, frozen. I raised my camera, hoping to capture evidence. The creature snarled, then charged, not at me, but into the forest. I chased it, heart hammering, deeper into the woods, where no GPS signal could reach. The trail led me to an ancient stone circle, covered in moss and carved with strange symbols. There, the creature stopped and shifted, its body morphing between man and beast in a blur of fur and flesh. I realized then that the legends were true. I was face to face with a werewolf, and the forest was its domain. That night, I barely escaped with my life, but the encounter left its mark. Since then, I felt a strange connection, an almost magnetic pull, toward the wild, toward the moon. Sometimes, I hear that howl again, just outside my window, and I wonder if the beast still watches me. When I was 17, I saw the eyes in the woods. I was living with my grandparents in a tiny town near the Ozark Mountains. Summers there were thick with heat and secrets. Everyone knew the woods were dangerous after dark, but we were kids. We dared each other to venture deeper. One night, under a swollen full moon, My friends and I sneaked out to the edge of the forest, daring one another to go further than anyone before. The air was thick and still, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin. Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes appeared, fixed, unblinking, staring at us from the shadows. We froze. Then came the growl. Deep, resonant, and terrifying. Out stepped a creature, tall and muscular, covered in coarse fur, but moving with unsettling agility. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp teeth, and I felt a primal fear clutch my chest. We ran, but I glanced back once. The creature was following, not running, but stalking. I scrambled over roots and rocks, heart pounding, lungs burning. I didn't stop until I burst through the trees and into the streetlights of town. That night, sleep abandoned me, and the next day, strange marks appeared on my arms, claw-shaped bruises that no one could explain. I never told anyone what I saw, but sometimes, when the moon is full, I swear I hear those eyes watching me from the dark. They say you never forget the weight of empty air. I learned that when I saw the swing still moving in Elder Hollow, without a soul to push it. My name is Aiden Clark, and I've spent my life running youth outreach for the county. I take at-risk kids camping, teach them to fish, ride horses, find confidence under open skies. When I planned our October weekend retreat at Elder Hollow Campground, I expected scrapes and campfire skits, not blood-drenched legends come to life. Elder Hollow sits where two creeks converge under ancient maples, a place of mist and memories. Locals avoid it in October. They say long ago, two children vanished from that very swing set under a red moon, never to be found. The townspeople whispered of wolf shadows and half-heard laughter in the pines. I chalked it up to spooky folklore and booked the cabins anyway. Our group was 5 teens and me. We arrived Friday afternoon, hauled gear to cabin 3, and set up. The swing set, ribboned with rust and spiderwebs, stood by an old stone well. I joked, "Who's up for a race to swing under the moon?" They laughed. We split firewood, cooked hot dogs, then gathered around the embers to talk. I told them the Elder Hollow story. 2 kids, a swing, a scarlet moon. Their eyes lit up with adrenaline, begging for truth. I promised a moonlit visit at 10:47 p.m. The hunter's moon crept above the trees, pocking the ground with red light. Lanterns bobbed as we strode down the path. The woods were quiet, too quiet. No crickets, no owls, only the crunch of our boots. We reached the swing set. The 2 swings hung still, or so I thought, until one moved. Slowly, a foot-sized groove appeared in the dirt beneath it, then 2, as if someone just hopped off. But the seat hadn't slowed. It kept swinging in that scarlet glow. "Cool breeze," I said, but my voice shook. Before anyone could respond, a low growl sliced the air. 2 shapes emerged behind the swing. Tall, bent figures stepping on digitigrade legs, arms too long for a human, muzzles parted in snarls. Their eyes were silver discs reflecting the moonlight. The teens froze. I swallowed, my heart pounding. Back to the cabins. "Now," I barked. We bolted. I led them through winding trails, branches whipping our faces. Behind us, the wolves hurled their howls, 6 voices blending man's despair and wolf's hunger. I glanced over my shoulder. One beast leaped onto the swing frame, claws raking steel, then vanished with a single bound into the darkness. By the time we reached cabin 3, the power had flickered out. Inside, we huddled under blankets, windows, and doors locked. The lantern light cast jittering shadows across the walls. The howling came again, circling the camp, sometimes close enough to hear heavy breathing. One of the teens, Sarah, trembled. "They want us," she whispered. The boys tried to laugh it off. I patted their shoulders, fighting panic. "They'll go away at dawn," I promised, though I didn't believe it. I stayed awake, shotgun across my lap, eyes on the window. At 2:02 a.m., I heard scratching, claws on wood. Not the door, but the roof, the decking above us. My blood froze. A loud thunk on the roof. Then, another. The cabin groaned, under the weight of something large. I swung the lamp upward, nothing but warped shingles. I slammed the shutters. Below, a soft thud on the porch. Then a whisper, Sarah's voice, or something like it. Aiden, I raced to the window, yanked open the curtain, and saw her. The specter of a little girl, pale as moonlight, standing among the trees beyond the porch. Light. Her dress was tattered, hair matted, face smudged with tears. She raised a hand and pointed toward the swing. My throat constricted. "Get down," I shouted to the teens, grabbing Sarah's arm. We bolted to the screened front door. I heard the children's faint laughter, high and broken, echo through the cabin as we slammed outside into the cold. A dozen wolves circled the cabin now, eyes dancing silver. They closed in silently. I fired into the darkness. 2 shots. One wolf yelped and slumped, but the howling only grew louder, more triumphant. Another emerged from the trees. The swing rider, her face twisted into that same half-wolf grin, silver eyes gleaming with cruel joy. I aimed at her, but my hands shook. She let out a keening laugh, part child's cry, part animal's howl, and vanished into the brush. The wolves retreated, slipping back into the woods like smoke. I gathered the teens and led them to my truck, heart pounding. The engine roared to life, and we sped down the muddy road, chasing the promise of dawn. Behind us, I heard the final howl, singular, mournful, of the girl and her pack, claiming their lost playground. We didn't stop until we reached Highway 12. I pulled over, hands shaking, and we huddled inside until the sky pinkened. When the sun rose, the forest fell silent once more, as if the night had never happened. I never took another camping trip. The teens returned to the city, the swing set scar left in my mind. I sold my cabin, and now work in urban outreach, far from hungry woods. But sometimes, when the hunter's moon climbs high, I still hear the swing creak, the children's laughter, and the whispering pines calling me back to Elder Hollow, where the lost never truly leave. And I still wake 2 letters carved on my bedroom window: sweeten your blood, because legends die hard, and some truths chase you home. I still remember how the streetlights died. My name is Harper Nguyen, and I was on my honeymoon when I first heard about Greyhaven. My husband Lucas and I had booked a week at a lakeside inn, a romantic getaway far from our busy lives in Seattle. We arrived just after dusk, golden leaves swirling around the parking lot. The inn's manager greeted us warmly, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the north woods as he handed over our keys. "Be back before nightfall on the trails," he warned. "Greyhaven's unsettled." I laughed it off. We unpacked, had a quiet dinner by the water, and talked about nothing but the future. Kids, new jobs, vacations. By 10, we were sated and dozing in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. I woke at 2 a.m. to silence. No crickets, no distant waves, just a drifting hush. I nudged Lucas. He mumbled something and rolled over. Then, without warning, the power cut out, plunging us into pitch black. I fumbled for my phone, no signal. I clicked its flashlight on and saw Lucas sitting upright, eyes wide. "That sound," he whispered. I listened. Far off, a low howl drifted across the lake, trailing into the woods on the opposite shore. It was long, sorrowful, and utterly human. Lucas and I exchanged a look. "We should go back inside," I said, though fear pinched my voice. We slipped on shoes and jackets, pushed open the patio door, and stepped into a nightmare. Outside, the inn's parking lot was empty. Chairs had been overturned, car doors left swinging. The lights along the shoreline walkway were dark, and not a soul stirred. A cold wind whipped through the trees. A distant howl echoed again, closer, broken with a crackling shout that sounded like someone calling for help. Lucas grabbed my hand. We crept to the lobby, where the front door hung ajar. Inside, the front desk was abandoned, keys scattered, guest register open to a blank page. The elevator light flickered. I called, "Hello." My voice sounded small. Then, the howl rose, a chorus of at least 3 voices, right outside the windows. We peered through the glass, 6 figures moving along the edge of the tree line. Tall, gaunt, half-hunched, fur matted into torn clothing. Their faces glinted pale in the flashlight beams we'd managed from the lobby. They stared at us, mouths opening to howl again. Lucas pulled me back. "We need to find the manager." We tore through the dark hallways, checking rooms. Every door was within arm's reach, but empty. Not a single guest remained. The inn felt like a ghost ship, every corridor echoing our frantic footsteps. On the second floor, we found the manager's office. He sat at his desk, alive but shaking, eyes wide, lips moving in silent prayer. His door was locked, so Lucas kicked it open. "Mr. Caldwell." He looked up, tears tracing white tracks on his cheeks. "They hunt the town," he croaked. "Only they remain on the nights of the red moon. Everyone else, they vanish." I felt my knees go weak. "What do you mean?" He swallowed, voice cracking. "Last week, the original owners of the inn, gone. The fishermen down by the pier, gone. The trail guide, gone. All vanished. Only footprints and claw marks in the dirt. No bodies. Then the howling. And by morning they're gone, too." Lucas and I exchanged a horrified glance. Behind us, a low, guttural snarl cut through the silence. The manager balked, scrambling, to a file cabinet. He pulled out a map of Greyhaven, marked in red. 6 small cabins clustered near the woods. "They hide in them," he said. "When you see them, you run." We had no choice. I grabbed my wedding ring off the dresser. I didn't want to lose it. And Lucas found an old shotgun behind the desk. Together, the 3 of us dashed into the cold night. The 6 cabins huddled beneath towering pines, windows dark. Our flashlight beams landed on claw gouges and doors, shattered glass, tattered curtains fluttering. 3 cabins were empty. 2 had bodies, unblooded, drained, skin drawn tight, eyes staring empty at nothing. And in the last cabin, 6 figures crouched around a fireplace. They looked up as we burst in. One rose, towering above us, matted fur glinting red under its eyes. It tilted its head, throat bulging, as it barked a savage laugh. Others followed, filling the cramped room with hungry forms. Their features twisted between man and wolf. The shape of limbs wrong, jaws too wide, teeth stained. Lucas fired the shotgun. The recoil nearly knocked him over. One beast staggered, then roared, sending splinters flying. The others lunged. I screamed, tipping a small table at them. The manager shoved past, dragging us out, slamming the door. We barreled back to the inn, stumbling through the black without care for paths. Behind us, cabin doors creaked open, 6 sets of yellow eyes stalking our retreat. The howls rose around us in a triumphant chorus. We slammed into the lobby and locked every bolt we could find. The manager manned the ancient landline, calling the nearest town for help. Dawn was still hours away. Lucas and I huddled by the window, cradling the shotgun, every shadow shifting with terrible intent. The howling slowed, then ceased. An unbearable silence followed, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. When the first gray light came, we crept outside. The beasts were gone. Only paw prints and footprints remained in the softened snow. They faded into the trees like ink in water. We found help at sunrise. Rangers arrived to clear the mass vanishing, the bodies, the claw-scarred cabins. The manager was questioned, then quietly committed to an asylum, his mind unmade by those nights. Lucas and I left with the first rescue helicopter. I never went back to Greyhaven. The inn stands empty now, boarded up, local legend gathering dust, but sometimes I still wake from that night, heart pounding, cold sweat stinging my eyes. I see those silhouettes under pines, hear the chorus of howls, and know the truth. Under a red-tinted moon, monsters walk on two legs, and no town is safe from their hunt. I don't carry a gun anymore, but I keep a mirror by my bed to remind myself what I am and what they are. Because once you see the beast in human form, you can never unsee it. I never thought I'd thank a storm. My name is Josie Ramirez, and I've spent the last year on the road as an emergency veterinarian, bouncing between small towns where animal rescues are as common as hay barns. I never stayed anywhere more than a few weeks, until Coldwater, Idaho, where the sky stretches wide enough to swallow your doubts. I'd just finished a 10-hour drive when the storm hit. As if the clouds themselves had heard my exhaustion and decided I needed a baptism. I checked into the small motel on Main Street around dusk. The wind shredded the pines outside, and I thought I heard branches snapping even above the roar of rain. I dropped my bags and went out to my truck, only to find hoof-deep ruts in the gravel. 4 hoof-shaped dents followed by 2 long, human-shaped prints, claw-scored and pointing straight toward the woods. A chill ran up my spine. I'd seen deer, elk, even the occasional stray wolf, but nothing with footprints like these. I took a picture and texted it to my vet friend, Nate, joking that Coldwater was off the charts weird. He didn't reply. That night, the power flickered out. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, the thunder shaking the windows. Around midnight, I heard it. Low, ragged breathing in the hallway, right outside my door. I pushed myself up, heart thumping, and tiptoed to the PEEPHOLE. Nothing. Then, 3 slow knocks, solid, deliberate. I swallowed. "Who is it?" I called. No answer, just heavy footsteps backing away. I checked out at first light, too rattled to stay, but the storm had flooded the roads. I was stuck. So I called the local clinic, offered to help with any stray animal emergencies. 2 hours later, I sat in the exam room under fluorescent lights, scrubbing in for surgery on a collared wolf hit by a car. As I worked, I noticed the wolf's collar tag, Coldwater Pack. My blood ran cold. I spat the anesthesia drip and ran to the front desk. "Pack," I demanded of the receptionist. "You mean wolves? Like a wolf pack?" She nodded, pale. "The Coldwater Pack. They roam the forest east of town. We track them carefully. They've never attacked anyone, until last week." She tapped a file. A young hiker had vanished on a full moon night. No sign of struggle, no blood, just footprints, hoof and claw, leading in a circle around his campsite. Then nothing. I swallowed hard, imagining the footprints outside my motel. "I need to see those reports." Her eyes flicked toward the door. "You sure?" I nodded. Minutes later, I stood before the sheriff's bulletin board, studying maps and photos. Full moon dates highlighted, missing person names clustered like graves. And always those prints. An impossible 2-step gait. Hoof followed by claw. That night, after my shift, I drove out to the old logging road. The storm had passed, leaving rivulets and muddy puddles. I parked, grabbed my flashlight and tranquilizer rifle, and followed the ruts into the trees. My boots sank in mud. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. The moon rose pale. As I reached a clearing, I found the campsite, a battered tent, a cold campfire, the hiker's backpack torn open. No blood, just ripped clothing and empty water bottles. I knelt, heart pounding, examined the mud. That same hoof claw pattern, hoof print, 5-toed gash, hoof gash, repeating in a wide circle. Then I heard them. First a low growl from the dark, then 3 more, echoing. I raised the rifle toward the tree line. 6 forms emerged under the lunar glow, stepping into the clearing in perfect unison. They were all 8 feet tall, faces half wolf, half man, muscular torsos draped in ragged fur, arms ending in wicked claws. Their eyes shimmered, copper, disdainful, ancient. They circled me, never breaking stride, their jaws parting in silent snarls. My breath caught. I remembered my training. Animals sense fear. I forced myself to steady my grip. Then one paused, head cocked, nostrils flaring. Suddenly, it threw back its head and howled. A keening chorus rose as the pack joined in, a multitonal wail that shook my bones. It wasn't just an animal call. It was a cry of pain and triumph. They closed in. The lead beast lurched forward, claws scraping on stone, and I squeezed the trigger. The dart flew, catching it high on the shoulder. It bellowed, stumbling back, but it did not fall. It shook its head, eyes wild, then leaped into the forest like a shadow. The others followed, without a word, vanishing between trunks until only the echoes remained. I collapsed against a tree, trembling, listening to the silence. When the radios crackled, I could barely speak. The sheriff's team arrived, bloodhounds, trackers, all following the hoofclaw trail. But hours later, they returned empty-handed. No bodies, only flattened grass and a reddened moon overhead. I left Coldwater the next day. The clinic quietly transferred the wolf surgery to another vet. No one pressed me about the storm or my early departure. Back in Seattle, I replay every moment in my mind. The hoofprints in the motel gravel, the raspy breath outside my door, the faces of that pack under the blood-tinted moon. Sometimes, I wake in the dark and think I hear their howls around my apartment building. I follow the sound to the window, nothing but city lights. But I know they're out there, bound by lunar curse and hunger, waiting for the next red moon to call them home. And every time the sky turns crimson, I feel them watching, and I wonder if one night they'll find me too. I never thought a forest could bleed, until I saw the sap run red dot. My name is Harper Halliday, and I'm a field botanist. I study tree health, bark diseases, invasive species. You know, the kind of stuff that keeps most people reaching for aspirin. Last spring, I was called to investigate an outbreak of wilting birches in the northern Maine highlands. The locals whispered of witchcraft and wolf's curse, but I packed my press on the map data sheets and headed into the pines. By the time I reached Birch Hollow, the canopy was thinning under patchy die-off. White birches stood mottled in gray, leaves shriveling on the branches. I set up camp at the trailhead, then spent 2 days collecting samples and drilling core plugs. At night, I slept under a green tarp, lulled by the hush of needles in the wind. On my 3rd evening, as the hunter's moon slipped into view, I hiked deeper to check a remote grove. The trail narrowed until I was shoulder to shoulder with hardwoods, their trunks smooth and pale. I ran my hand along each bark for fungal cankers, but one tree sent a chill through my glove. Its bark wept. Sap oozed in thick rivulets, but it wasn't gold or amber. It was deep, dark red, like blood. I knelt, heart hammering, dipped a finger in the ooze. It smelled of iron and pine, as though the forest itself were bleeding. I snapped photos, bagged samples, and heard a bark crack behind me. I whirled my headlamp. Nothing. Only the moonlight glinting off birch trunks. I shrugged it off, wind-fractured limbs, then hurried back to camp. Blood sap samples sealing my canvas pack. That night, I dreamt that trees were alive, their branches writhing like arms, roots pulsing beneath the soil. I jerked awake to snapping, outside the tent. In the glow of my lantern, I saw prints, four-toed and spindly, like a wolf's, but each pad was a human-shaped heel. They marched in a neat line around my tent, ending at the nearby birch, whose sap I'd sampled. Morning brought no comfort, only bruised dawn light. My sap samples were empty vials, labels smeared. The blood had vanished. I questioned my eyes. On the fourth day, I heard them, howls down by the creek at midnight, 6 voices merging in a raw symphony that split the dark. I grabbed my camera and flashlight, raced to the grove. Under the hunter's moon, the birches wept again. Sap ran red. 6 figures emerged, stepping from tree shadows, tall, hunched, limbs half man, half wolf. Faces a storm of bones and fur. They gathered around the bleeding birch, hands trembling as they pressed against the trunk, eyes closed. One raised its muzzle to the moon and howled, an ache of grief and rage. Their sap-dripping palms left red fingerprints on the bark. I fumbled with my camera. The flash revealed their true forms, 6 forest spirits, guardians trapped between man and beast, feeding on the birch's life to keep something older at bay. When I clicked the shutter, they snapped their heads toward me, eyes like polished garnets. I ran, heart pounding. Behind me, the howls turned savage. Branches tore at my coat. Snow slipping, I crashed through underbrush until I reached my truck. As I sped back down the logging road, headlights caught them at the edge of the grove. 6 silhouettes melting into the woods beneath the bleeding trees. I left Birch Hollow the next morning, sap vials in hand, but every lab I contacted reported empty samples. I never published my findings. Now, whenever the hunter's moon rises, I see red sap on trunks in my dreams. I hear distant howls in city streets, and I wonder if those forest spirits are still out there, feeding on birch blood to guard something even darker beneath the roots, something that waits for a moon's whisper to rise again, because in Birch Hollow, the trees bleed truth, and the wolves protect it with their own. My name is Travis Lowell. I grew up in the Adirondacks, where dense woods blanket the land like a patchwork quilt of pine and shadow. I've hiked more trails than I can count, and never once did I believe the old tales my grandfather used to tell, the ones about skinwalkers, forest witches, or worse. The Dogman. I always chalked those stories up to campfire fodder. But what happened to me last fall on a solo backpacking trip changed that forever. I wish I could unsee it. I wish I could unfeel it in my bones, but I can't. It's been clawed into me. I had taken a week off from work to decompress, and chose the northeastern edge of the park, off the main trails, in the kind of quiet only the deep woods offer. No cell reception, no people. Just the creak of trees and the rhythm of my own footsteps. I hiked in about 13 miles and set up camp near an abandoned fire lookout tower that hadn't seen visitors in decades. It was quiet, too quiet. The birds weren't chirping, the squirrels weren't skittering. I told myself it was just the early October chill that drove them off. That first night, I was lying in my sleeping bag when I heard a soft crunch outside the tent. I froze. It was heavy, bipedal, not a deer, and not a bear either. Whatever it was moved with intent. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. Crunch, crunch, then silence. After a long while, I unzipped the tent and scanned the area with my flashlight. Nothing. But when I turned back, I saw it. just for a second, between two trees, eyeshine yellow, high off the ground, too high. I thought I imagined it, told myself it was a raccoon on a branch or something. But the next morning, I found prints. Huge prints, larger than my boot. Long toes, clawed, not feline, not canine either, not exactly. I documented them, marked the GPS, and tried to rationalize it all. Maybe someone was messing with me. Maybe some guy with snowshoes carved to look like monster paws. But I couldn't shake the way those prints weren't leading anywhere, just pacing, circling. The second night was worse. Around 2 a.m., I woke up sweating. It was freezing outside, but I felt suffocated, like something heavy was sitting on my chest. Then came the breathing. It was just outside the nylon wall of my tent. Low guttural breaths, like a lion trying to stay quiet. I didn't dare move. I held my breath and lay perfectly still, hand wrapped around the handle of my knife. Then the tent shifted, like something had pressed a clawed hand against it. I could see the outline of fingers. Long fingers. It stood there, silent, unmoving. Eventually, it left. When I finally crawled out at dawn, I saw more prints, but this time, there was something else. Tufts, of course, grayish fur, stuck to the tree bark around my camp. I collected one. It smelled like wet earth and iron. I hiked out that day. I should have packed and gone home, but some part of me needed answers. So instead, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I decided to climb the old lookout tower at sunset, just to see if I could spot anything strange from above. I wish I hadn't. From up there, I had a clear view of the ridge and the treetops. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the woods darkened. And that's when I saw it. It was running. No, it was loping, like a wolf on two legs, towering, fast. It cleared a ravine in 2 strides. Covered in matted fur, its face was somewhere between human and hound. But the eyes, they glowed like coals, burning yellow through the gloom. It stopped, turned its head, and looked straight at me. Even from hundreds of yards away, I felt it, like it saw me, not just my outline. I climbed down that tower faster than I thought possible, and didn't stop running until my legs gave out 5 miles later. I never went back for my tent or my gear. I drove straight through the night, dirty, cold, shaking. I sent the first sample to a friend of mine who works in wildlife biology. She ran the DNA test 3 times. The results came back inconclusive. Closest match was Canis lupus, but only 70%. The rest, unknown, mammalian. I've tried to move on, but even now, sometimes when I drive through the woods near home, I swear I see yellow eyes in the trees, and I know that thing remembers me too, because some nights, when the wind dies down and everything gets quiet, I hear breathing outside my bedroom window, low, heavy, waiting. My name is Darius Feldman, and before last summer, I never gave much thought to monsters. I teach middle school science in Montana, live a quiet life, and always considered cryptid stories to be fun nonsense, urban legends at best. That changed when I spent 2 nights alone at an off-grid cabin my uncle left me, near the border of Glacier National Park. He died in that cabin. They said it was a heart attack. The sheriff found him collapsed beside his woodpile, eyes open, mouth twisted. The odd part? There were deep scratches in the logs behind him, and paw prints that made no sense. Massive, canine, but spread like a human's gait. I inherited the place because no one else wanted it. My mom begged me not to go. My sister said it had bad blood. I told them I just wanted to spend a weekend clearing it out, maybe fixing it up. Now I wish I had listened. The cabin sits about 5 miles off a gravel road, surrounded by dense trees that lean in too close. Even during the day, when I arrived, the place looked exactly like I remembered from childhood visits. Peeling red paint, a crooked chimney, and that same old porch swing with the broken chain. Inside, everything smelled stale. I opened the windows, aired it out, and started unpacking. By late afternoon, I had a small fire going and was sorting through my uncle's old belongings. A rusted tackle box, dusty books on local wildlife, a hunting rifle. That first night, I slept lightly. The woods were noisy, branches creaked, something scratched against the side of the cabin. I tried to ignore it. I chalked it up to raccoons, but just before dawn, I heard something that did not belong. It was a howl, but not a coyote, not a wolf either. It started low, then rose into this growl that ended in something too close to a scream. It made my skin crawl. I sat up in bed, heart racing. It sounded close. I waited for sunrise and walked the perimeter of the cabin. That's when I saw the prints in the dirt beside the outhouse. Big ones, deep, 5 toes, but wide, with long claw marks behind them. I measured one with a stick. It was almost 15 inches long. I should have left then. I should have packed up and gone home. But I told myself again and again, bears can rear up on 2 legs. Maybe it was a grizzly. Maybe I was letting the isolation get to me. That night, I loaded the rifle and kept it beside me. Sometime after midnight, I heard scratching, not like before. This time it was slow, steady, like claws dragging across wood. I sat there in the dark, holding my breath. Then I heard breathing. It was outside the wall, just beside the window. Heavy, animalistic breathing. Something large. I grabbed the rifle and crept toward the window, heart hammering. And that's when I saw it. It was standing just behind the tree line. Tall, towering, covered in thick black fur, but its face wasn't right. It was like a wolf, but stretched, like it had too much muscle in the wrong places. It stood upright, shoulders hunched, arms too long, claws twitching at its sides. Its eyes caught the moonlight, amber and narrow, focused, curious. Then it stepped closer. I fired a shot through the window. The creature flinched, snarled, and vanished into the trees. I heard it crashing through the undergrowth. Then silence. I stayed awake until dawn. The next morning, I found the spot where it had stood. The grass was matted down. One tree had claw marks, deep grooves running from shoulder height to the roots. I packed. I didn't care what I left behind. On the way back down the trail, I felt watched the entire time. Every crack of a twig made me jump. Every shadow twisted into something monstrous. I told the sheriff. He said animals wander that area. I told a park ranger. He laughed and said, I saw a bear. But I know what I saw. That was no bear, no wolf, no costume. Something lives in those woods. Something ancient. My uncle didn't die from a heart attack. Not if the look on his face was anything like mine when I saw that thing. I've never been back to that cabin. I sold the land for cheap and never asked who bought it. I just hope they never try spending the night. My name is Ezra Mendoza, and I used to think the stories about werewolves were just that, stories. My grandmother told them to us when we were kids, half in warning, half in jest. They walk like men, but think like wolves, she would whisper in Spanish. Keep away from the pines when the moon is full. We laughed. We rolled our eyes. We never believed. But last winter, on a winding mountain road, outside a town called Cold Pines, I found out she was right. I was traveling to visit my cousin, who had recently moved to a remote mountain town for a writing retreat. My car had broken down in Denver, so I took the only option left, a rickety long-haul bus that made the trip once every other week. It wasn't glamorous, but it was cheap and dependable, or so I thought. There were only 6 of us on board, including the driver. Everyone looked tired. A mother with a toddler who would not stop crying. A man in a red parka who smelled like wet fur. A teenage girl with headphones so big they swallowed half her face. And an older woman dressed in black who never said a word. I picked a window seat near the middle and dozed off somewhere past sunset. Around 9 p.m., the bus slowed down. I opened my eyes to see snow flurries floating against the headlights. We had reached a part of the road with thick trees pressing in from both sides. The driver muttered something about visibility and tapped the brakes as we hit a sharp bend. Then something large ran across the road. It was fast. I barely caught it. A flash of dark fur and something like a hunched back. It darted from one side of the road to the other, then vanished into the trees. The driver swore and slammed the brakes. We skidded. The toddler screamed. I braced myself against the seat. When we finally stopped, the driver stood up and said, "Probably just a deer." But his face told a different story. He looked pale, shaken, like he had seen something much worse. That was when the bus went dead. The lights cut out. The engine coughed, sputtered, and fell silent. "No cell service out here," he said grimly. "Just sit tight. I'll try the engine again in a bit." The heater stopped working. The windows fogged over. We all sat in that cramped, silent bus surrounded by forest, snow falling harder by the minute. That was when we heard the first sound. It started as a low growl. Not close, not far, just out there, around us. Someone laughed nervously. Probably coyotes. Then we heard something hit the back of the bus. Hard. A thump that shook the floor under our feet. The driver grabbed a flashlight and headed to the back door. "Stay here," he said. "Could be a branch." He stepped out into the snow. I watched him through the fogged glass as he walked around the rear of the bus, light bobbing. He vanished behind the corner, and then we heard him scream. It was not a startled shout. It was a blood-curdling scream that made everyone jump to their feet. The woman in black stood and calmly closed the bus door, then sat back down. That unsettled me more than anything else. We all peered out, trying to see what was happening. Suddenly, something slammed against the side of the bus, so hard it rocked the whole thing. The guy in the red parka shouted, "What the hell was that?" Before anyone could answer, the thing stepped into the headlights. It was taller than any man I had ever seen, easily 7, maybe 8 feet, covered in shaggy, dark gray fur, with long arms that nearly reached its knees. It walked upright but hunched forward, like it barely fit into the shape it was in. Its head, it was the head of a wolf, but twisted with something human underneath, eyes too intelligent, too focused. Its breath steamed in the air. The teenage girl started crying. The creature walked around the front of the bus, sniffing. Its claws scraped the glass. Then it locked eyes with me. I do not know how to describe that moment. My heart stopped. I could not breathe. It looked right through me, like it knew I saw it, like it wanted me to remember it. The man in the red parka lost it. He pulled open the emergency hatch on the roof and climbed out, muttering about taking his chances in the snow. None of us followed. I heard his footsteps on the roof, then silence, then the sound of something heavy dragging across metal, a wet crunch. Something fell past the window, leaving a smear of blood down the glass. We all screamed. The creature howled, a deep, furious sound that rattled my teeth. Then the headlights flickered, and the engine coughed. The lights came back on. So did the heater. The woman in black stood again. "It is gone. For now," she said. "This place is old. Older than the town. Older than the mountains." We didn't move. None of us spoke. The engine growled back to life, and the bus, slowly, rolled forward. The driver was gone. So was the man in the red parka. But the woman sat back down like she had seen this before. We made it to Cold Pines around dawn. The police barely believed us. They found pieces of clothing near the road. Nothing else. No tracks. No blood. Just silence and snow. I never took that road again. I do not think any of us did. Sometimes I hear about people going missing near those woods. Sometimes hikers. Sometimes loggers. No one ever finds the bodies. But I remember that thing's eyes. I remember that howl. I will never forget. I didn't believe in the full hunter's moon curse until I met the silver. I'd stranger under its glow. My name's Deacon Wright, and I'm a park videographer for the Upper Peninsula Park Service in Michigan. I film wildlife documentaries, moose calving, wolf packs hunting, autumn colors, pure nature. I've slept in tree stands, kayaked at dawn, lived for the perfect shot. People tell me I have the best job in the world. Until now. Late October, we were prepping for the eclipse, interviewing rangers, setting up cameras for the rare silver hunter's moon. When the moon takes on a ghostly sheen, folks up here whisper it awakens something older. I laughed it off. Legend and gristle, nothing more. I arrived at Northwood Campsite on October 24th, a collection of 7 rustic cabins ringed by white pines. I was to film sunset time lapses before the eclipse. Cabin 4 was mine. Creaky floors, wood stove, a single barred window. At twilight, I stepped outside for B-roll. Mist rising from the lake, loons crying. The moon peeked through clouds, pale and perfect. That night, around 2:03 a.m., I know, because I checked my watch, I was awakened by snapping branches. My headlamp revealed a figure at the tree line. Tall, lean, its face hidden in shadow. I cocked my camera, heart thudding. When the moon emerged from clouds, I saw it. Silver eyes, 2 glowing orbs, staring back. No reflection, not wavering, unblinking. I whispered, "Hello." It tilted its head, and I caught a glimpse of fangs, human teeth, longer than any wolf's. Then it stepped forward and vanished. I stood rooted until the wind rattled the cabin. The next morning, I found hoof-like prints in the mud outside. 4 big toes, a dew claw, no bear, no wolf. Something else had brushed past. That night, the generators across the campsite died in unison. Lights flickered off like a breath exhaled. I climbed out with my camera, recording audio. I whispered into the mic, "Testing, 1, 2, testing." The night was silent, until a low, throaty growl rolled through the pines. I flicked on the camera's infrared. 6 figures emerged, tall, oddly upright, each glowing-eyed stranger, stepping from cabin to cabin. They paused beside each door, studied it, then moved on. No knocks, no doors opened, just a silent inspection under the silver moon. My blood froze. I backed into the cabin, slamming the door. Through the window, I saw one figure pause and lift a claw to my cabin's window, tracing a symbol in the frost, a triple crescent intertwined with a wolf's head. I felt its gaze burn through the glass. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I reviewed the footage. Silent beasts, eyes like polished coins, runes carved into frost. No explanation, just legend come to life. I left the park early that morning, used my contacts to scramble footage to the office, citing equipment failure. They thanked me, promised a closer look, but the silver-eyed stranger was no animal. It watched us, judged us, marked our cabins with its sigil, and I know it will return under the next silver hunter's moon, to finish its inspection and claim what it chooses. Now, every eclipse I avoid the wild. I stay in cities where the only eyes gleaming in the dark belong to humans. Because once I met those silver strangers, I understood. Legends aren't bedtime stories. They're warnings, etched in the frost, whispered by wolves and carried on the wind. and I will never ignore them again. I thought my past was buried until the Raven's Roost called me home. I'm Mia Torres. 10 years ago, I left the mountain town of Silverpine after my brother disappeared on Halloween night. I swore never to return, but when the blood moon was foretold to rise again, I knew something waited for me at Raven's Roost, the old cemetery atop Widow's Hill. Silverpine was built on ghost stories, miners lost to avalanches, children chasing lanterns, and the howls in the deep forest. My brother, Jonah, was always enthralled by the legends. On his 21st birthday, 16 Halloweens ago, he and his friends climbed Widow's Hill at midnight to summon the wolf choir, a rite ignored by every local adult. He never came back. The town moved on with hushed whispers, and I moved to Seattle. I became a trauma nurse, saving lives in ER chaos, anything to drown the guilt. But when I saw the forecast, lunar eclipse on October 31st, blood moon rising at 11:11 p.m., I knew Jonah wasn't finished calling me. I arrived in Silverpine on October 30th. The streets were adorned in pumpkins and flickering lanterns, but the faces I passed held tight dread. At the inn, the clerk, old Mrs. Bellamy, slid me a carved wooden talisman, a wolf head circled by a moon. "Keep this close," she whispered. "Raven's Roost opens when the moon bleeds." I thanked her, but laughed it off. I'd been in traumas far worse than legend. That night, I drove up Widow's Hill. The road zigzagged through pines, their trunks like silent sentinels. At the summit lay Raven's Roost, a graveyard of weather-worn headstones, iron fences draped in rust. I parked, talisman cold in my palm, and stepped onto the path of blackened cobbles. The air felt thick, as though the past and present weighed on my lungs. I passed a child's grave, Jonah Torres, 1980, 1999, and my heart twisted. I fought tears. Behind me, the wind moaned through broken lanterns and cracked mausoleums. Midnight approached. I stood beneath a granite angel, wings outstretched, and waited. Then, a flicker of red light as the moon rose behind the pines. Its glow bathed the cemetery in crimson. My skin prickled. The talisman throbbed against my chest. At 11:11 p.m., the blood moon peaked. A hush fell, and then, the howls, first distant, mournful, then closer. They rose from every corner. 6 voices, a chorus of wolf and man. I hunched, breath ragged. From the tree line, 6 shapes emerged, towering, gaunt, their heads a savage marriage of lupin snout and human jaw. Their eyes burned gold, coats of matted black fur dripped dew. They moved in a circle around me, paws clicking on cobblestones, claws sheathing in moonlight. I backed into a stone wall, heart pounding. One of the wolfmen stepped forward, and I recognized Jonah's stance, his slow, easy gait. My breath caught. "Jonah," I whispered. He cocked his head, eyes flickering with ancient hunger and pain. He opened his mouth, but not to growl. A strangled echo half-word, "Mia." My tears fell. I shouldn't have come. I raised my voice. "I'm here. I'm sorry." He glanced past me. The other 5 closed in, their howls rising in a shockwave that rattled the gravestones. I turned. Shadows moved behind me, figures stepping from tomb niches, wolves forging flesh into bone, graves cracking open, all eyes fixed on me. I ran, slipped between stones, stumbled across iron headstone railings. They poured after me, 6 wolfmen, 6 spectral wolves, one vast choir of the damned. Their howls tore the night air. I reached the wrought iron gate, locked, rusted, but flung myself against it. The snap echoed like a gunshot. I burst free into the trees and fled down the hill. The path ended at a broken service road. My car's headlights flickered to life as I boarded, slamming the door. I peered in the rear view. Jonah stood at the cemetery edge, head bowed. Beside him, the wolfmen watched. I raised the carved talisman in my trembling hand. Its rune glowed bright, white. On the stone step of my car, Jonah lifted his head, revealing his human eyes bright and full of longing. Then, he lowered his face and howled, a heartbreaking sound that carried to me even over the engine roar. I sped down the mountain, moonlight receding behind me. Wolves' echoes chased my tires. Only when I reached town did I breathe again. I returned the talisman to Mrs. Bellamy. "Take it," I stammered. "Keep it safe." She smiled sadly. "He still needs you." I left Silverpine that night, heading east on Highway 12, knowing I'd never outrun the howl in my blood, because, when the blood moon rises again, I will hear Jonah calling, his half-wolf choir begging me to come home, and I will return. I never thought a forest could bleed until I saw the sap run red dot. My name is Harper Halliday, and I am a field botanist. I study tree health, bark diseases, invasive species. You know, the kind of stuff that keeps most people reaching for aspirin. Last spring, I was called to investigate an outbreak of wilting birches in the northern Maine highlands. The locals whispered of witchcraft and wolf's curse, but I packed my press on the map data sheets and headed into the pines. By the time I reached Birch Hollow, the canopy was thinning under patchy die-off. White birches stood mottled in gray, leaves shriveling on the branches. I set up camp at the trailhead, then spent 2 days collecting samples and drilling core plugs. At night, I slept under a green tarp, lulled by the hush of needles in the wind. On my third evening, as the hunter's moon slipped into view, I hiked deeper to check a remote grove. The trail narrowed until I was shoulder to shoulder with hardwoods, their trunks smooth and pale. I ran my hand along each bark for fungal cankers, but one tree sent a chill through my glove. Its bark wept. Sap oozed in thick rivulets, but it wasn't gold or amber. It was deep, dark red, like blood. I knelt, heart hammering, dipped a finger in the ooze. It smelled of iron and pine, as though the forest itself were bleeding. I snapped photos, bagged samples, and heard a bark crack behind me. I whirled my headlamp. Nothing, only the moonlight glinting off birch trunks. I shrugged it off, wind-fractured limbs, then hurried back to camp. Blood sap samples sealing my canvas pack. That night, I dreamt the trees were alive, their branches writhing like arms, roots pulsing beneath the soil. I jerked awake to snapping, outside the tent. In the glow of my lantern, I saw prints, four-toed and spindly, like a wolf's, but each pad was a human-shaped heel. They marched in a neat line around my tent, ending at the nearby birch, whose sap I'd sampled. Morning brought no comfort, only bruised dawn light. My sap samples were empty vials, labels smeared. The blood had vanished. I questioned my eyes. On the fourth day, I heard them, howls down by the creek at midnight, 6 voices merging in a raw symphony that split the dark. I grabbed my camera and flashlight, raced to the grove. Under the hunter's moon, the birches wept again. Sap ran red. 6 figures emerged, stepping from tree shadows, tall, hunched, limbs half man, half wolf. Faces a storm of bones and fur. They gathered around the bleeding birch, hands trembling as they pressed against the trunk, eyes closed. One raised, its muzzle to the moon and howled, an ache of grief and rage. Their sap-dripping palms left red fingerprints on the bark. I fumbled with my camera. The flash revealed their true forms. 6 forest spirits, guardians trapped between man and beast, feeding on the birch's life to keep something older at bay. When I clicked the shutter, they snapped their heads toward me, eyes like polished garnets. I ran, heart pounding. Behind me, the howls turned savage. Branches tore at my coat. Snow slipping, I crashed through underbrush until I reached my truck. As I sped back down the logging road, headlights caught them at the edge of the grove, 6 silhouettes melting into the woods beneath the bleeding trees. I left Birch Hollow the next morning, sap vials in hand, but every lab I contacted reported empty samples. I never published my findings. Now, whenever the hunter's moon rises, I see red sap on trunks in my dreams. I hear distant howls in city streets. And I wonder if those forest spirits are still out there, feeding on birch blood to guard something, even darker, beneath the roots. Something that waits for a moon's whisper to rise again. Because in Birch Hollow, the trees bleed truth, and the wolves protect it with their own.